I run a question and answer series for worship leaders, and one of the most common questions that I get, probably within the top 3 most common questions I get, is something along the lines of, my worship team leader doesn't resource us early enough or appropriately enough with enough resources. What do I do? I'm just a worship team member. I got another question like that sent in recently, and I want to use this question as being emblematic of the problem, and I'll walk you through how I would deal with it if I were a worship team member on a worship team when their worship team leader didn't prepare properly, didn't send them the songs early in the week, didn't give them the resources that they need. Here's the question. Hello, Spencer. I'm 51 years old and my pastor is 32. I'm a volunteer leader on our worship team, guitar and vocals. My pastor is musically trained and I am self-taught. My pastor has 5 young kids, is working on his PhD, and also plays electric guitar with us on Sundays, so he's very busy. His wife plays piano with us as well. I love serving, but my pastor is very bad at communicating with me about anything to do with the music programming. Sometimes he'll change a song last minute and neglect to tell anyone until Sunday morning. He's constantly trying to eliminate practice midweek, which I think is very important. He's shaved the hour that we used to have for Sunday run-through to 35 minutes, and just last Good Friday he gave us half an hour to prepare for the service with 6 songs. Needless to say, with no time to play through the songs as a group, there were flubs. He's also somewhat of a micromanager and doesn't want to hear any of my song suggestions, and really doesn't like it when I suggest he'd be better off with telling me what's going on. I love him, but sometimes it feels like he's doing things just because he wants to assert himself. His vision seems to be, if it's good enough, I'm fine with it, whereas I want us all to be improving each time we play together. The tension comes in because I'm sort of the leader, but since he's the pastor, it's actually his job, and he's doing it, just not well in my opinion. I have to say, after putting so much of my energy into this ministry, having this kind of difficulty with my pastor really does hurt. I could go on, but I'll stop and get your thoughts. Thank you. So there's the situation that we're working with. Does that sound similar to your situation? What? The worship leader is super busy with other things in life. Like, that isn't true of everybody in the world. The worship leader changes songs at the last second. The worship leader doesn't send out the songs beforehand. The worship leader doesn't have a good plan for their worship rehearsals, which, by the way, if you need a plan for your worship rehearsal, or if you want to see what a worship rehearsal should look like, check out the worship rehearsal blueprint. I'll link it down in the description below. It's a step-by-step plan for your next worship rehearsal that will lead your team well musically, spiritually, and relationally so that they are prepared for Sunday morning, grow closer to God, and grow closer to each other. So if that's your situation, what do? You're just a lowly worship team member. You have no authority on your team. You barely have any influence on your team. What can you do? You're super frustrated. Here's the first step I would take. First of all, I think you need to ask and answer the question, is my worship team leader doing their job? And I know at first you're like, no, they're not doing their job. They're supposed to be giving me everything that I need. And honestly, you're probably right. But here's how I want you to think about that. Think about the commitment of their job. There are full-time worship leaders. There are part-time worship leaders. There are volunteer worship leaders. In this situation, it sounds like there's a pastor who's in charge of leading the worship team. Think about the expectations your worship team leader has in serving in that role in your church, because there is a difference between a full-time worship leader where they spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week at your church, and the volunteer worship leader where they're just doing it in their spare time and trying to squeeze it in whenever they can. And so you have to think about what realistic expectations can I have for them? Are they being financially supported by the church to do full-time ministry and they're not getting the worship team their songs on time? Because if that's the case, then I'm going to be, I don't know if a bit more harsh, but less lenient on them, I suppose, because this is their job, and they should be doing it, or else they're not fulfilling their responsibilities at church. On the other hand, if they're a volunteer worship leader, I would be more lenient with them. That being said, it's still their responsibility to get the worship team the materials that they need on time, the songs for Sunday, the chord charts, etc. And just because it's a volunteer position doesn't mean that you should do a bad job at it and then it's suddenly okay because you're not getting paid by the church. Like I said, different expectations, but these are minimum requirements for leading a worship team. If I was a volunteer worship leader at my church, there are a lot of things that I do right now. By the way, I'm only part-time at my church, so even if I was full-time at my church, there would be even more things that I would be able to do that I'm not able to do right now. But I'm part-time, so those responsibilities are diminished, and I have to stick to more essential things. If I'm a volunteer, then I have to stick to an even tighter group of essential things. But one of those essential things is getting your worship team the songs in a timely manner. Because as the worship team leader, there's other responsibilities that we have, but as the musical worship team leader, that is the highest priority for us, logistically speaking, during the week, is to make sure that your team is ready for Sunday. So whether they're full-time, whether they're volunteer, this still needs to be addressed. I'm just saying, as you temper your conversation, your expectations about the conversations, if they are full-time in ministry and they're not getting you, your team, the stuff on time, then I'm going to be more direct with them than a volunteer worship leader. Which brings me to the first thing that you actually do. And the first thing that you actually do is you don't go to everybody else on the worship team and say, I can't believe that this person isn't getting our chord charts on time or sending out the songs on Sunday. The first thing that you do isn't send a question to me. The first thing that you do is you go to the worship leader. You go to your worship team leader one-on-one and say, hey, I was just wondering if there's any way that we could get our songs earlier. And I know that seems incredibly obvious, and maybe you even feel like you've done that before, but I know in the past for me, I've thought that I've done those things before. I have stewed in anguish as my worship team leader. This hasn't happened to me because I've pretty much always been the worship team leader, but as somebody on my worship team did something that I didn't like, and I was frustrated with it, and I thought about it over and over again, and I felt like I had addressed the situation, but really I just talked about it to myself in my head or complained about it to other people. But I never actually went to the person one-on-one and actually talked to them about it. So if you haven't done that step, that is the first step. You must go to your worship team leader and have a gentle conversation. This isn't a time for you to go in and be like, I need those songs because I can't get ready and you're not doing your job, and so on and so forth. First of all, that's probably never an appropriate way to have the conversation, but definitely not the first conversation. This person might not even know that it's a problem, even though it seems incredibly obvious to you. So go up to them, say, hey, can we have a conversation after rehearsal tonight? Or if you don't have rehearsal, after Sunday morning. Or if you don't have time on Sunday morning, grab coffee with them during the week. And you go up to them and say, hey, I've really been struggling lately with the worship ministry. I just feel like I can't prepare properly for Sunday morning. It's really hard for me to get the songs on Friday night, and then I really only have Saturday to rehearse them, and I have stuff going on with my family on Saturdays usually, and so I don't even have that much time on Saturday. And so I show up on Sunday morning and I just feel inadequate because I don't have enough time to prepare to lead worship on Sunday, to do my best for God. And so I was wondering if there's any way that I could get the songs earlier in the week. Do you see how in that conversation, it's not, you need to get me the songs earlier, you need to send them out, I don't know what you're doing during the week. It's just, hey, listen, I can't function this way on the team right now, and I feel kind of bad about it because when I show up on Sunday morning, I'm not ready. And if somebody came up to me, like somebody who's been serving on the worship team for a while, or a key volunteer that I trust their opinion, which I trust, basically anybody on my worship team who came up and said that, I would pay attention to them, I would feel bad as a worship team leader. And not that we're purposefully trying to make the worship team leader feel bad, but there should be a sense of guilt, I think. And that's okay. They should feel ashamed that they haven't resourced their worship team properly. So if you feel like you're making them feel that way, don't think that you're doing something wrong. We're not doing that intentionally necessarily, but that is part of the process. I'm saying if that happened to me, I would be like, I've failed my team and I need to do better. And then I would get them their songs earlier. But the problem comes if all the worship team members have never actually gone to the worship team leader and told them this, and they're just talking behind the back, and they're like, this seems so incredibly obvious to us. Why don't they just do it? So the first step is to go to the worship team leader one-on-one and tell them what the problem is. If you haven't done that yet, you're not going to solve the problem. Go to them one-on-one, tell them what the problem is. The second step is go to the worship leader and tell them what the problem is. By that, I mean go to them again. If you have a conversation the first time and it doesn't work, sometimes people need multiple touch points on the conversation before they actually apply what you're trying to get them to apply. So go to them again. And maybe this is, 3 weeks later, a month later, something like that. And you walk up to them and say, hey, I know we had a conversation about a month ago about getting the songs earlier. I'm still struggling with getting prepared, and I was just wondering if there's any progress on that front. Like, is there any hope in the future of getting the songs earlier in the week, or I'm really going to have to start thinking about what that means for me on the worship team? And I wouldn't say that as an ultimatum, like, I'm going to quit the team if you don't get me my stuff on time. But that is an appropriate response eventually. I'm not saying that's the first response. We need to go through an appropriate process, which we're starting right now. We've told them about it once. Now we've told them about it twice. And eventually, you're going to have to make the decision, which we'll get to at the end here. You're going to have to make the decision, can I still serve on the team? Because I'm not going to show up, this is me personally speaking, if the worship team leader gets me the songs Saturday morning, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be on that worship team. And it's not because I don't love God. It's not because I don't want to serve the church. It's because the leader in the church is not equipping me for the work of ministry, which is their job. Ephesians 4:12, to equip the saints for the works of ministry. And if you can't do that, I'm sorry, you're not fulfilling your role in the church. And we can think this way, okay? I'm a worship team leader, so I'm speaking to other worship team leaders here. I know maybe you feel like, well, I don't know if I can feel that way as a worship team member. Let me just tell you, that's their job, all right? At the very baseline, what does it mean to equip the saints for the work of ministry in worship ministry? It means, what is the role that they're doing? Even before we get to the spiritual stuff. Well, I mean, the spiritual stuff, this logistical stuff should flow from the spiritual stuff. But the primary logistical expectation is that you would be able to play your songs on Sunday, lead them well, play your parts for your songs, sing the words, know the lyrics, play the guitar parts. That is the form of ministry that you are serving in. If your leader cannot equip you to do that, then they aren't fulfilling their function. And so we'll talk about whether you should stay on the team here in just a minute. But in the meantime, what do you do? Let's repeat. What have we done so far? We've tempered our expectations. We've asked, are they full-time? Are they part-time? Are they volunteer? Somewhere in between? What are they doing? Number two, we've talked to them one-on-one. We've said, hey, this is a problem. The problem still hasn't been solved, maybe. Hopefully it's solved by that first conversation. That would be amazing. But if it isn't, you follow up with a second conversation and just repeat your thoughts again and say, listen, this still isn't working for me. Now, what do you do while you're waiting to see if they fix it or not? There's a couple things. First of all, we should lead by example. Hopefully, a rising tide raises all ships. Is that the saying? I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this in a band. You probably have, because I think it's a universal experience. If there are really good musicians on a team, in a band in general, if you're just jamming with someone, it raises everybody else's musicianship. And so I want you to focus on being that person that raises the musicianship of the team. And you do that if you're not the leader and you don't have direct influence on your team. You do that just by being really good at what you do. So maybe for the next month, try as hard as you possibly can. If you get the set list on Friday, try with all your might to be super prepared for Sunday, for rehearsal, nail your part every time, and set the example for what it should look like to be prepared, even though you aren't being set up to be prepared very well. And by the way, in that process, you might find out that you don't need as much time to prepare as you thought you did. That's not an excuse for your worship team leader to not resource you early, but you might find that to be the case. So lead by example. Number two, you can offer, especially in the case of this person who asked this question, you're like, I'm the leader on the worship team. I wasn't sure how this relationship actually plays out, but it sounds like there's a pastor who's technically in charge of the worship team, but then you lead on the worship team. I'm not sure if you're just the worship leader or what, but it sounds like you have some influence, the person who asked this question does. And so this would be the perfect opportunity for you to step up and say, listen, if you can't do this, then I'll take it over for you. I'll pick out the songs on Sunday. I'll send out the chords. Or if you still want to pick out the songs, you pick out the songs, send them to me on Tuesday. I'll send out the resources that the team needs by Wednesday or something. And that way you're offering a solution now. Now, if the person's full-time, I'm not going to do their job for them whenever they're being paid by the church, serving in full-time ministry to do that. This is their job. But if they're a volunteer, even if they're, probably not if they're part-time. If they're being paid by the church, they should be sending out the songs early, okay? We'll talk about that here in a second. But if they're a volunteer, just offer, hey, maybe you can't do this part. Let me help. And this is us coming alongside them, helping them out. Now, that brings us to the third thing to do in the meantime, and that is, if this person is full-time, if this person, and doesn't have, like if they are just the worship pastor, or something, they're not like, they don't have like 50 million other responsibilities. if they're just the worship pastor, if they were hired to be the part-time worship leader and they're being paid by the church to do a job, then I think it's appropriate to go to someone, the appropriate person. We aren't telling everybody in the church, but whoever the appropriate person is to talk to, whether that's your pastor in your church or maybe you have an elder board or something like that, go to somebody who it's appropriate to talk to and say, can I have a conversation with you about the worship ministry here? Listen, I'm really struggling because when I show up on Sunday, I don't feel prepared to lead, and it seems to me like it's because we aren't being resourced properly or being resourced early enough, and I just need your advice on that situation. And we're not going to them and saying, hey, you need to fire this person. At some point, it's appropriate to talk to somebody who can do something about it. And notice how this wasn't the first step. All right, we aren't sowing discord behind the worship leader's back because we've already told them multiple times. And now I'm just going to someone, a leader in the church, and asking their advice on it. And once again, choose the appropriate person, all right? You know who that is in your church. We're not just telling some random person, gossiping about this person. I don't know if it's really gossip because it's actually happening, but we're not sowing discord in the church just because. We aren't going to other worship team members and complaining to them about it because they can't do anything about it. Go to the person who can actually do something about it. If the worship team leader is full-time or part-time, if they're being paid to do this, this is a key logistical expectation. I'll keep saying that because it really is. To get your worship team the resources that they need in a timely manner. Go to the right person in your church and say, I'm struggling with this because I feel like I'm not being resourced properly as a worship team member to do what I need to do when I help lead worship on Sunday. And then finally after that, if you've waited, let's talk about the timeline here. How long would I give it? I might give it 3 months, which I think is very generous. 3 months to see improvement. And I'm talking 3 months from that first conversation with your worship team leader. Hey, I'm struggling. Can you send out the songs earlier? Okay, it doesn't happen. Follow up with another conversation after a month. Now we're 1 month in. Hey, this still isn't working. I wait another month to see if they change. Still isn't working. I go to a key leader in the church. I don't gossip about them behind their back. I don't sow discord in the team. I go to somebody who can actually do something about it and say, I'm struggling in the worship ministry. This isn't working. What's your advice? And then after that, I come to the final step, which is you need to make a decision. And there are really only 3 decisions that you can make. Number 1, you're going to quit the team. You're going to say, you know what, I can't do this any longer because I'm not able to serve in the way that I feel like I need to serve with a clear conscience before God. Meaning, I want to give my best to God, and I can't give my best to God because I'm not being resourced appropriately, and probably I'm a little bit embarrassed to serve on the team if the team is horrible, and it seems like we're not doing our best for God, when really it's just the worship team leader didn't get us our songs on time. That's the first decision you can make. The second decision you can make is I'm going to stay on the team and continue to try to fight for being resourced earlier. And you just continue that process of what I talked about, where you continue to talk to the worship leader. If my worship team leader isn't resourcing me in a timely manner and they continue to not do it over and over again, I'm going to keep having the conversation with them, like once a month maybe. And I know that might seem a little bit annoying, and eventually, I'm probably just not going to be on the team anymore. But if I'm going to choose to stay on the team, I'm going to keep having the conversation with them in a nice way. I'm not condemning them, but they need to know that it's a problem. So that's the other choice that you can make. I'm going to be on the team. I'm going to keep trying to change it. The other decision you can make is I'm going to continue on the team, but just learn how to function with how things are right now. I'm going to learn how to learn my songs on Friday night and be ready for Sunday morning, which I know isn't easy. It's not fun. But maybe you'll grow as a musician. And maybe you'll learn little tricks along the way, like how to learn a song faster, or maybe how to, feel a song instead of being locked into the chord sheet, and you'll feel the chord changes, and you'll grow that way. By feel, I mean like instead of memorizing the chords, you'll just know the song and be able to play it. Or maybe you'll realize we only sing 30 songs, we have a 30-song repertoire, and so I just need to focus on learning those 30 songs, and then I'll be ready pretty much every Sunday. So although I don't like to say it, this could be a growing opportunity for you as a musician, even though it's a difficult situation. So there are your three options. Now, maybe your worship team leader just doesn't know what a worship rehearsal should look like or what they're supposed to give the worship team in advance. And that's why I put together the worship rehearsal blueprint. I'm not saying go download that and hand it to your worship team leader, but maybe gently point them to my YouTube videos and they'll get the idea that they should be prepared in advance, because I talk about that frequently on my YouTube channel. Or maybe say, hey, I found this worship rehearsal blueprint online. I was wondering what your thoughts are on it. I think it might be a good idea for our team, and hand it to them. And don't pressure them into it, but say, I was just thinking about this, and it seems like this would help us lead our team musically so we're ready to go for Sunday, spiritually so that we grow closer to God, and relationally so that we grow closer to each other. Who doesn't want that on their worship team? I want my worship team to be prepared for Sunday. I want my worship team to grow in their relationship with God, and I want the relationship between my worship team members to be stronger. If you want to do that with your team, check out the worship rehearsal blueprint. I'll link it down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.